Hello everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we'll be going over all of the basics of Crochet Tapestry and how to add it in your pieces. Because most solo tapestry pieces utilize single crochet, today's video will show you how to choose the best stitches, how to color switch back and forth, and how to use gridding to map out your projects. If this video helps you, please leave a like and subscribe. Good luck! Part 1 is the basic principles. Because many clothing pieces do not use single crochets, it's hard to find tapestry pieces that work. While single crochets work extremely well for these standalone pieces, it's extremely hard to overlap that with your clothing pieces. Because of this, I will be teaching you today how to use these single crochet ideas in half double crochet and double crocheted pieces. Written here is a detailed explanation of what I'm about to talk about. I figured I would leave it this way so if you ever want to return to these ideas, you can just check your phone for a screenshot rather than combing through the whole video again. Most of these ideas can still be used for the single crochet method, but the point of this video is to teach you how to incorporate it for half double crochets and double crochets for clothing. The first tip is to match your crochet hook to the size of the yarn exactly. On pretty much every single yarn label, you'll find a few key bits of information. What we're looking for is the recommended hook size, which you'll see with a little crochet hook and a millimeter number above it. In many cases, you'll simply just be able to match that up to the yarn by grabbing the hook it tells you to. It is important to note though, you can also check this out by matching the size of the yarn to the hook just by pulling them up against each other. This will help in certain cases where the yarn is way thinner or way thicker than the recommended hook size. For example, this piece here. It recommends a 6mm hook, which is nearly double the size of the yarn that's there. So I recommend sizing down. In this example, I'm grabbing a 4mm hook and just eyeballing which you think is going to fit the best. This will help keep your piece uniform. The second tip is to make sure that you have bobby pins or stitch markers readily available. While over time, you'll learn how to do this without using them, a lot of beginners can really benefit from being able to mark their stitches. Simply choose the piece that you know you want to remember and insert your bobby pin or your stitch marker into it. Now, instead of just having to count all of your stitches, you'll just be able to find the one you left. You can just pull it out when you're done. Third tip is to know that half double crochets make a sturdier piece than a double crochet does. For those of you who have never crocheted before and are using this as your first video, here's a small explanation of how to do a slip stitch, a chain stitch, a half double crochet, and a double crochet. When making a slip stitch, you wrap the yarn around your pointer and thumb fingers, and then use the other side to pull it through like so. This tightens whenever you pull on the shorter tail piece of yarn. Many pieces use this to start it off, and then you put it on your hook like so and pull it taut. To make a chain stitch, you loop the yarn over your hook, and then you pull it straight through the loop that's already on the hook. This is usually how you elongate a piece to determine its height or width depending on the direction. It's also the easiest stitch, and it takes a little bit of getting used to, but you'll get it pretty quickly. Once you have your desired length, we'll make sure to chain one extra because we're making a half double crochet. You make one extra to allot for the fact that a half double crochet is taller than a chain stitch, and then you'll insert the half double crochet into the second stitch from the hook. To do so, you yarn over, then push your hook straight through the loop. Then you yarn over again, pull it through until you have 3 loops left on your hook. From that point, you yarn over one more time and pull it through all 3 loops, creating your half double crochet. Because the stitch is so compact, it makes a sturdier sort of pattern, so you want to use this for things where you need a very tight sort of fabric material. Things like bags and crop tops and straps and handles work really well with this sort of stitch. Next is the double crochet. We start the same by making a slip knot and then chaining. This time though, skipping 2 loops to allot for the height of the double crochet. So we'll start the same where you yarn over, push through a loop, and then yarn over again. And that's when we start to change the pattern a little bit from the half double crochet. When you have 3 loops on your hook, instead of pulling through all 3, you're just going to pull through 2, and then make sure that you have another 2 loops left on the hook. From that point, you're going to yarn over again, and then pull through the other 2. Because of this looser sort of height that it gives, a lot of double crochets are used in blankets and skirts, and just larger projects. I do want you to keep in mind when we go over the gridding that it will have a slightly different sort of pattern because it's not a square, it's more of a rectangular stitch. Part 2 of this video is how to use grids. There are so many websites that you can use and you can choose the one that works best for you. I like to use pixelart.com, not sponsored, I just like it the most. Once you're there, explore the website and you'll be able to learn all the different ways to change your colors, change your dimensions, and to make your design itself. The most important thing to know is how to size a double crochet or half double crochet. Double crochet will be nearly a 1-to-1 ratio, but the pattern will be slightly taller, and a double crochet will be slightly different, being that since the two rectangles together make a near perfect square, it should line up almost perfectly. So recommend making sure you do a little bit of a color differentiation in your drawing process so you don't get confused about what stitches are where when you're doing double crochets. Just keep in mind it's very common for your whole project to stretch upwards a little bit, just because human error for one, and also because different heights and different stitches can lead to a different size of your pattern. Part 3 is the color switch. Starting with half double crochets, you always want to start this before the stitch you want the color switch in. 3 loops left on your hook, instead of yarning over and pulling through, you're going to choose your new color and pull through with that. You want to make sure that this stays on the hook and that you leave a small tail that you can weave in afterwards. You weave it in by making sure that little tail goes over your hook and then under the piece of yarn you're pulling through with. Make sure you pull the tails taut as you go forward with this. That will keep your piece from unraveling. Make sure you really get the hang of how to do this, so that way as you go through your pieces, everything looks really crisp and really clean. Rewind this if you need to. Onto a double crochet. You also want to do this in the stitch before you want the colors to change. This time now, making sure that you have 2 loops left on your hook before you pull through your new color. Just as with the half double crochet, you want to pull your tails taut and weave in the ends as best as you can. Part 4 is a small practice project, making this cute little bunny design that I have here for you. Pause here on the directions to take screenshots of them. I want to make a small note that step 6 or row 6 here is different than what is written. I do have it covered up for you to see, but ignore that small typo. Everything else is exactly the way it needs to be. Also keep in mind, in the top left corner, all of the directions will be written for you to look at. For materials, you will need less than 100 grams of 2 different color yarns that are weight 4, a 5.5mm hook, as well as some scissors and some stitch markers if you're electing to use them. I do recommend that for beginners, by the way. For row 1, you're going to start with a slip stitch and then you're going to chain 16. Again, I recommend rewinding if you've never crocheted before and rewatching that spot where I explain how to do this. After you've made your slip knot and pulled it through on your hook, you're going to chain 16 times. You're then going to turn your work, as I explained before, and begin to half double crochet all the way across this chain piece. Remember that chain 16, or the extra chain there, is so that way you can turn your work around, not to make it 16 chains long. I recommend counting as you go to make sure that you have the 15 chains here as you make 15 half double crochets into them. If you find that you added too many or you didn't do enough, just go back and add some more or subtract from the chains that you did earlier. It's super common to miscount, that's why I recommend stitch markers for new beginners. Once you've made that first row, you're going to chain 1 at the end, just so that way we can flip the work and begin crocheting again from there. You'll do that at the end of every row. For row 2, you're going to half double crochet across, still just using that main color, and then chaining 1 at the end. Again, make sure that you have exactly 15. For row 3, you want to do the same thing, half double crocheting across, but I recommend using stitch markers here if you've never used this sort of method before. In the directions, you'll notice that you need 4 half double crochets at the start of the next round. To make sure you remember this number, I recommend adding a stitch marker on the 4th stitch and on the last 2 4th stitch, if that makes sense. I'll show you when we get there. Basically, do your 4, add your stitch marker, and then crochet until there are 4 left here. Add your 2nd stitch marker, and then finish off, chaining 1 at the very end of the row. Now when you get to row 4, you're going to begin following these patterns that I have listed. You'll half double crochet for 4, color switch for 7, and then color switch back for 4 more, chaining 1 at the end. I'm going slow in this row to give you a really good visual of what you'll be doing, but as we move through the video to speed things up a bit, I want you to make sure that you're following exactly the pattern as it is written in the directions and as it is written in the top left corner of the screen. Just so you remember, the CS stands for color switching, so that way every time you're color switching back and forth one way or the other, you'll see it right there in the top of the video. I know directions can be confusing, especially for beginners, so if you need to slow the video down, since I have it sped up for time purposes, do not be afraid to do so. It'll help you understand each piece a little bit better. In the meantime though, try to read the directions before you slow anything down to see if you can comprehend it first. Row 5 is a half double crochet for 3, color switch for 4, color switch back for 1, color switch again for 4, and then color switch back for 3. Like I said, I know that's going to sound very confusing, so be very careful when you read through the directions, and if you need help, like I said, slow the video down. To get better at tapestries, you'll need to get really used to switching back and forth from colors constantly, so I chose this practice pattern to make it a little bit easier for you to learn. At the end of your row, make sure you do not forget to chain 1 so that way you can flip your work around afterward. Pause the video to look at the steps in the left-hand corner or reference your directions here. These steps are going to get very long and confusing for me to read out, so please just read them as they are. Now is also a good time to say if you have any questions during this process, please just leave me a comment and I will do my best to clear it up. Even this project being as a beginner as it is can be extremely confusing to get used to having to switch back and forth so often and so quickly. I want to make sure you all know that I'm always available for questions and I will answer everything to the best of my capability. I am, however, slowing down this row 9 through 12 because it is, in my opinion, the most confusing row in the bunch. I'm going to be crocheting back and forth between colors all the way across to create that little ear shape. That means you'll be going purple, then white, then purple, then white, back and forth, or whatever color it is that you're using. A tip for going through this part of the video is not only just to go very slowly, but to really make sure that you are looking at exactly which stitch you're going into, and to try and make sure you're not tangling up your yarn as you go. Lay it down very gently in between color switches, so that way it doesn't start to make one big ball at the bottom, or continue to cross over itself a million times. It also will help after you make row 9 to use stitch markers in each of the white stitches for rows 10 through 12. That way you don't end up having anything in the wrong spots, and it'll help you a little bit better when you don't have the time or the mental energy to keep counting in between each and every stitch. In the end, once you finish this row and you've gotten the hang of it, you will pretty much be set for any sort of project in the future utilizing color switching. So don't be upset or freak out if you don't get this right on your first try. Take it apart, try it again, break it down however you need to, but I do recommend making sure that you can make this practice piece all the way before you start getting into these bigger projects, just so that way you don't end up frustrating yourself. And again, do not hesitate to comment with any questions that you may have. I would love to help you however I can as you make your way through this project. Don't forget to chain 1 at the end of each of these rows. For row 13, it's going to be much simpler. You're just doing the tops of the bunny ears. Again, just reference the pattern as it's written and slow the video down if you need a little help doing so. You can cut your second color here. Your last 2 rows are simply half double crochets all the way across the top. Remember, if you were doing this as a part of a sweater, you would just keep making it as you go, not stopping at the ends or anything. When you're done here, you'll cut your yarn and pull it through, and then weave in your ends however you see fit. Again, if you were doing this on a giant piece, like a bag or a sweater or a blanket, you wouldn't end up needing to cut anything now, you just continue making the piece as it is. If you're just leaving this as a tapestry though, weave in your ends as best as you can. And with that, you are done. Thank you so much for watching this video, and please, if it helped you, leave a like and subscribe. I make new videos every Tuesday in the afternoon. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Depop and check out my summer sale. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.